Okay, quadratic equations. So on your formula sheet for the exam, you would see this formula. Y minus k equals ax minus h squared. You will see that on your formula sheet during your exam. So do you remember what everything meant in that formula? The vertex is the coordinate hk, and the slope is the a number, right? You only need those two things, and boom, you can graph it. The vertex and the slope. So when we looked at this formula to the hk, did you notice how this is a subtract h and this is a regular h? So what do you do when the formula has a negative value? You write the opposite. So the vertex on this one would be -3, comma, -7. And the slope is 3. So what does that tell me about the direction that this will open? If your slope is a +3, then it will open up. And what's the domain of any parabola? Domain is how far left to right. -infinity to infinity. Range is the y's, so you have to say how low to how high does it go. What's the lowest? So this one will be some kind of low number and then infinity because it's going upward. So where do I get this low number from? What is this called, this point called? The vertex. So what height is that vertex sitting at? We already have it. -7 to infinity because it goes up. Okay, the axis of symmetry is, if I could chop this in half and fold it. When you do a line that goes straight up and down vertical like that, you have two choices. It's special. Should I write x equals or y equals? X equals. And what x value does it go through? It's on our paper. What x value does it go through? -3. And the y-intercept, what is the definition of a y-intercept? It is where what? X equals 0. So I'm going to use my equation and I'm going to replace x with a 0. Okay, so what's the math on that? So 0 plus 3 is 3 squared, so BEDMAS. I did the brackets 3, I did the exponent, 3 squared is 9. 3 times 9 is 27. And then I would still have to algebra, got to get rid of the 7 as well. Okay, so here's my graph. I did -3, -7 already. Okay, over and up is the pattern on a parabola. So when we do just a normal pattern, How does it go? Normal. 1, 1, 2, what would be the 2 move? 4, 3 would move 9. Okay, that would be normal, but that's not what I'm going to do because I have to adjust. What do I need to do? There's a slope of 3. So that comes into play now. What does that do to yours? You do what? You times your up by 3. So it's going to make it a little skinnier. Remember that? On your exam, this always bothers me when people get a y-intercept that doesn't match what their graph is doing. So check. Does this visual look like it would cross the y-axis at 20? Yeah, that looks reasonable. If you, for instance, got an answer of -7 or -10 or something like that, would this look like it would cross there? No. So you have to make sure just it makes sense. Okay, there you go. Do one on your own. Number 2. Trig. So this was the very first unit that we did. How do you know if you use sine law or cosine law? Do you remember the rules? If you have a what, you use sine law. Do you remember that? If you have a pair, you use sine law, right? And if you have either a what or what, you use cosine law. Do you remember those ones? SAS or triple S, that means cosine. Okay, so that's basically the idea that gets you through the whole trig unit. We have a pair. So I'm using sine law. So I'm going to write that as 11 over sine 40 degrees. Okay, this is not going to get me anywhere because I can't find the x because I don't know what's across from it, so that doesn't pair up for me. So now what? Got to think of something else. Probably something with that 13 since it's on the page. What do you want to do? Do you have a game plan here? I'm going to find this angle using the 13, and then what? 180 minus those, top angle, boom, pair. Okay, so that's the game plan. You ready? 13 over sine, can I call it the letter y? Because I don't want to call it x. So I'm going to find, we're going to call this angle y. Typing it into your calculator, we're going to do this. Remember, we cross, multiply, divide, multiply, divide. What's always the rule to get an angle? When you get an angle, you're going to be pushing what at the very end? Second shift sign. Okay, and on your exam, you should also do what? First and foremost, check it in degrees, because then you're getting your answers wrong. Times, divide, sine inverse. So do all those steps for me. Okay, I got 49.4 degrees on that inverse. That was good. And then give me the 180 minus the bottom corners to get your top corner there. So that was step 1, step 2, and then I'm going to do a whole nother sine thing. So I'm going to go 11 over sine 40 again equals x over sine 90.6 degrees. So partners, partners. Okay, give me cross multiply times there and divide by the lonely one. There's no inverse, right? Because it's just a side. And then 17.11 to 2 decimal places when you're done. Okay, this is another graphing quadratic, and yes, there's going to be both of them on your exam. We just did a one form, now we're going to do the other. So on your formula sheet on the exam, you would see that format for a quadratic. And you would also see x of the vertex equals, and then there's a little formula. Does anybody remember that tiny little fraction formula that helps us get the vertex? Yeah, negative b over 2a. So that's the one we have to do with this. So negative b over 2a. So what is the opposite of this b number? Positive 6 over 2 times the a number, which is negative 1, right? So what is 6 divided by negative 2? Negative 3. How do I get the next part of this then? That was just the x. How do I get the y? Remember how to get that? You need to do a plug-in. So what is the negative of negative 3 squared minus 6 times negative 3 minus 7? Do you notice how the math, there's a common mistake with this negative of the negative squared, so just be careful there. So what does this come out to be right there at the start? What is the negative of negative 3 squared? Negative 9 plus 18 minus 7. Which is 2. Okay, what is the slope number? Same as last time, I'm looking for the a value. What is the a value? Negative 1. So what does that tell me about this parabola? It's going to open like this. It's going to go downward. It didn't ask for it, but I see it over here. It says min or max. What would you call this vertex? A min or a max? Max. So I see that over there, and it all depends. If it opens like this, it's a max. If it's going to open the other way, your vertex is a min. What's the axis of symmetry? What's that line that goes right through the middle? How do you always start it with? X equals, and the x number that we're going through here is negative 3. Domain, same, is negative infinity to infinity. Range, the lowest is down forever, so negative infinity to exact top height of 2, because that's the height of my vertex. So the y-intercepts is that we're going to make the x 0, and then we should get that number like that fast. If x is 0, boom, what do you come out with? -7. If x is 0, this is all 0, this is all 0, subtract 7. Okay, the sketch. Okay, so here's my vertex, -3, 2. Over up, I already put that on my paper somewhere on the side, just the 1, 1, 2, 4, 3, 9. But we are going to have to times by -1, times this by the slope. Bless you. So there's my pattern of just 1 over 1 down, reset, 2 over 4 down, reset. Okay, and then always checking, does my y-intercept make sense on my graph? Okay, so a trig question, we're asking ourselves, do you have a pair, a SAS, or a triple S? Those are your 3 questions, unless it's a right triangle, obviously that's another scenario. What do you got? Pairs, SAS, or triple S? SAS. So this is cosine law. So there would be a formula on my formula sheet that would go x squared equals 1 side squared, so 8 squared plus 10 squared, subtract 2, 8, 10 cos of 60 degrees. So there would be a formula on your formula sheet that you would be following along. Do you remember the looks of that formula? I'm going to type this whole thing in one step, and then what do you have to do at the end yet? To get the very last step, you're going to have to do what to get x? Square root your answer. Okay, so whole type in all in one long step in your calculator. Okay, we have completing the square on your exam. How did we do that? Okay, so step 1 is that I don't want the end of this trinomial, so I'm going to move it out of there. So I'm going to be minusing the 9. Okay, now this is a simple trinomial, which I need. So if there had been something in the front, I would have had to take it out, but there's not. Simple trinomial. I'm going to end this simple trinomial with something specific. Do you remember to do something and something to get that? Half squared. So this is what I'm looking at. Take half of it. Remember half of it? Square it, and you get a 16. Okay, what did you just do to the equation? You added 16 on that side, so it's a teeter-totter. So now what should you do? Add 16 to the other side. That's the balance. So this is y plus 7. Then the purpose of this trinomial is that it will be a binomial squared. It's a perfect square. So what binomial would FOIL to that? Well, first of all, what would get the x squared? An x. What would get you the 16? 4. And how are you producing a -8 in the middle? So this number needs to always double and square. Double and square. Okay, revenue question is up next. So this one says you're selling tickets and you're having people come to your concert and every concert ticket is worth a certain price. So would it make sense that my revenue is the price times the number of tickets? Or the people or the number of tickets? That's how I make my money, is the price of every ticket times however many tickets are being sold. Okay, then we're going to read and then we're going to fill in. So the first sentence says you're selling tickets for $9. So I'm going to put that at the price, $9. At this price, 200 people come. So 200 tickets. For every $2 increase in price, so increasing the price by 2, but I need a variable on that, right? Because I don't know. I might increase it 2. I might go up 4. I might go 6. I don't know. But every time this goes up to, 10 fewer people come. So minus 10x. Because if this goes up by 4, this goes down by 20, and so on. What do you want to do now? What would be your next maneuver here? Foil it. Okay, I'll give you a second. You can foil that on your own. Okay, so here's my foil. I'm going to just rearrange it. I'm going to go with the negative 20x squared first. I'm going to put those together because they're x's with more x's. So that makes 310. Okay, so what do I know about this quadratic? What do I know about this quadratic? It'll look like that. It'll look like that, my quadratic. And I am trying to maximize, my revenue. Look at that. I'm trying to find that max. How do you find max in an equation that looks like this? There's a tiny little formula. We just did it 2 or 3 questions ago. Negative b over 2a. So I'm going to go negative 310 over 2 times negative 20. If you are typing this in your calculator, you need to have brackets like that. So if you're typing it in your calculator, you got to have 2 times negative 20 in brackets. 7.75. Okay, usually we plug that in. If I plug it in, I would end up with the revenue. If I plugged it in here, it would equal the revenue. I don't actually want that. I want what price. So where should I go plug it in? Wherever I see the representation for price. So the ticket price was $9 and we went up $2 7.75 times. So that's called my ticket price. Okay, find the largest angle. Well, how do I know which angle that is? A, the B, or the C? It is C, and the reason is because it is across from the largest side. Then, do I have pairs? SAS or triple S is my next question. Triple S. So I'm doing a cosine law formula. So pretending that I'm looking at my exam, then I'm picking this formula. Okay, so cos of angle C equals some kind of fraction. There's something squared plus something squared minus something squared. I always fill in this. What do you always put here in the minus? You always do the minus of the one opposite. And then 9 and 6 are just anywhere else. 9 squared plus 6 squared, and then 2 times 9 times 6 on the bottom. Okay? I always fill that in first, then I replace everything else. In your calculator, you're going to want it to look like this. The top brackets divided by the bottom brackets, and then you're going to want to cos inverse your answer because we're getting an angle. Okay, those were the steps on that one.